Where are you watching us from? Think of a street, a cafe, an office. Think of the person next to you. Now imagine that in the blink of an eye, all of that could change, turned upside down because of a single decision, a single person who thought they were superior. What would you do? Would you fight for justice, even if everyone said it was a lost cause? Click the subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next, because the story I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you thought you knew about power and justice. It was a gray afternoon in Warsaw, Poland. The city, with its ancient architecture and cobblestone streets, had a melancholic but welcoming air. Raindrops tapped against the window of the small living room of Helena, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes but filled with a quiet strength. She held a cup of tea, but the liquid grew cold, untouched. Her gaze was fixed on the photo of her son Mikołaj on the mantelpiece. He was 22 years old, with a gentle smile and a look that seemed to see the world in a different way, a way that most people didn't bother to understand. The memory of that fateful day replayed in her mind, a looping film she couldn't stop watching. Mikołaj, who is autistic, needed routine like a person needs air. Routine was his anchor, what kept him safe in an unpredictable world. Every day at 3 p.m. sharp, he would go out to buy bread at the same bakery on the corner, on the same street, following the same route, meticulously planned in his mind. For him, every step, every smell of fresh bread, every familiar face was a link in a chain he needed to feel safe. If any part of that chain broke, he felt lost in an ocean of chaos. That day, the link broke. The bakery was closed. A small handwritten sign on the door said that the owner had fallen ill and that the bakery would be closed indefinitely. For most people, it would have been a mere inconvenience, a 10-minute change of plans. For Mikołaj, it was as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. His anxiety exploded. The familiar world became strange and frightening. He began to rock frantically, making sounds that helped him regulate himself, a self-comforting mechanism that his mother understood and respected. That was when Sergei, a police officer known in the neighborhood for his arrogance and for using his badge as a shield for his bullying, approached. Sergei was a large man with broad shoulders and an expression that seemed to be judging someone all the time. He saw Mikołaj as nothing more than a nuisance, a crazy person who was causing a scene on a busy street. He didn't care about the distress in the boy's eyes or the way he was desperately trying to calm down. He ignored the silent pain emanating from Mikołaj. Sergei pushed him against the brick wall and handcuffed him. Mikołaj, in shock, just stared at his hands, not understanding why they were locked. "He didn't do anything. He's just having a meltdown, please." Helena, who was nearby, had just left a pharmacy and saw the scene unfold in slow motion, terror growing in her chest. She screamed, begged, but was ignored. Sergei pushed her away and took her son to the police car. The desperation of that moment still burned in her memory. The scene of Mikołaj being taken away, confused, not understanding why his routine had been disrupted and why he was now being treated like a criminal, was the image that haunted her every night. That was the day Helena's world fell apart. The following days were a blur of despair and a relentless search for help. Helena, with the help of a neighbor, an elderly man named Kazimierz, who had known the family since Mikołaj was a child, managed to pay Mikołaj's bail. The official charge, however, was public disorder and resisting arrest, a blatant lie that echoed through the courtroom. Mikołaj didn't resist. He just tried to protect himself from something he didn't understand. She tried everything. She spoke to highway, lawyers, social workers, and even a support group for families of autistic people. The response, however, was always the same, a chorus of fatalism. It's his word against the cops, and the police, ma'am, always win these cases. They have the system on their side. One lawyer, whom she paid dearly for a 10-minute consultation, was especially cruel. With a condescending smile, he said, "Look, the best thing is for you to accept the blame, pay the fine, and move on. Fighting this is a lost battle, and it will only bring more stress to you and your son. You can't expect justice to be done in every case." The words fell like icy stones, each one weighing tons on Helena's heart. False hope was the cruelest of pains. Every "there's no way" or "you'd better give up" was a stab in her soul. She felt alone, helpless, as if the justice system was designed to protect the oppressor and silence the oppressed. People looked at her with pity, as if Mikołaj were a burden, a lost cause. The pain of having her son treated like a problem, not like a person, was almost unbearable. She saw hope slipping through her fingers, and the despair that justice would never be done consumed her. The small, close-knit local community quickly divided. Some who knew Mikołaj and his family supported Helena. Sergei was always like that, arrogant, thinking he owned the world. They whispered in markets and squares. But the majority, influenced by the official narrative and fear of authority, defended the police officer. He was just doing his job. The boy should have obeyed, were the phrases Helena heard, spoken with a coldness that cut deeper than any accusation. The silent judgment of society was a heavy burden. The biggest conflict, however, was with her own husband, Jan. Jan, a practical man of few words, believed in law and order. He thought Helena was overreacting, that their son had provoked the situation. Helena, he's a cop. They have a reason to act. If Mikołaj had controlled himself, none of this would have happened, John would say, his voice heavy with frustration and a weariness that seemed to come from years of misunderstanding. His denial, his inability to see his own son's vulnerability, tore Helena apart. It was as if she had to fight on two fronts, against the system and against the person who should have been her greatest ally. The school where Mikołaj studied also proved useless. The principal, fearing problems and the bad reputation that a court case could bring, refused to provide a statement explaining Mikołaj's condition and how it might have influenced his behavior that day. "We cannot get involved in legal matters," she said, with a coldness that cut deeper than any accusation. Society's judgment, the indifference of institutions, her husband's denial, all of this formed an insurmountable wall of misunderstanding and pain. When hope was almost dead, something unexpected happened. In a consultation with a new therapist, whom Helena had managed to find with her last resources, she poured out her heart. The therapist, a kind woman named Anya, listened attentively, and after a long silence, said, "Helena, you are not alone. I know someone who can help." Anya introduced Helena to Ivan, a retired lawyer who specialized in cases of injustice against minorities. Ivan, an elderly man with a white beard and a penetrating gaze, had a similar history in his family, and Helena's cause touched him deeply. He listened to her patiently, asked questions that no one else had asked, and asked to meet Mikołaj. The meeting took place in the garden. Ivan sat quietly on a bench, waiting for Mikołaj to approach. He didn't ask any direct questions. He just watched. He noticed how Mikołaj arranged the fallen leaves into perfect piles, how he caressed the bark of a tree, and how he was startled by the noise of an airplane. Ivan understood Mikołaj's inner logic, his need for order, his sensitivity. Ivan, unlike everyone else, did not see a madman, but a complex and valuable mind. "The law was not made for everyone, Helena, but we can use it to expose this truth," he said, with a determination that Helena had not felt in a long time. The quiet turnaround was not a grand event, but the discovery of a person who saw the truth where others saw only the problem. And that discovery was what rekindled the flame of hope in Helena. The preparation for the trial was long and exhausting. Ivan, with infinite patience, worked with Helena to create an accurate timeline of events. The main tactic would not be to attack the police officer directly, but rather to prove that Mikołaj's reaction was a manifestation of his autism, and that Sergei had acted with excessive force and a lack of understanding. The first victory came when, with Ivan's help, they obtained a security camera recording from a nearby establishment. The recording was blurry and had no sound, but it clearly showed Mikołaj's reaction when he found the bakery closed, and how he rocked back and forth to calm himself. It then showed Sergei's aggressive approach, an unnecessary push against the wall. There was no resistance, only fear. The second victory came in court. Ivan, with impressive calm, presented the case. Mikołaj was present, sitting in a chair in the corner, staring at the floor, wearing headphones to drown out the noise. Ivan called Helena to testify, and she, with a trembling but firm voice, described her son's life, his routines, his challenges. She did not paint a picture of sainthood, but of humanity. She described how different Mikołaj's world is and how he was not prepared for the violence of the outside world. The most emotional small victory, however, came from Mikołaj. The judge, seeing the boy's passivity, asked if he wanted to say anything. Mikołaj, who rarely spoke in public, took off his headphones. He looked at Sergei, who was sitting on the opposite bench, and in a soft but clear voice said just one word: "Why?" The entire room fell silent. That single word, laden with all the confusion and pain, was worth more than 1,000 testimonies. The judge, visibly moved, looked at Sergei. The victory was not only legal, but human. Mikołaj's voice, which had been ignored for so long, was finally heard. After Mikołaj's words, the trial took a different turn. The recording was shown. The expert witness, called by Ivan, explained how Mikołaj's behavior was typical of a sensory crisis and not aggression. Sergei tried to defend himself, saying he was just following protocol, but his words sounded hollow in the face of the boy's innocence. He looked at the floor, uncomfortable, realizing that his badge did not make him untouchable. The final twist came from John, Helena's husband. Sitting in the courtroom, he observed Ivan's calmness, Helena's strength, and above all, his son's vulnerability. Mikołaj's word, "Why?" was like a punch in the stomach. John stood up, and his voice breaking, asked the judge for permission to speak. He publicly apologized to the family and admitted that his denial and lack of understanding had been the biggest mistake of his life. It was a moment of profound transformation. Jan finally saw his son not as a problem, but as the person he really was, a human being with special needs, but with the same dignity and right to live in peace. Jan's acceptance was the greatest victory for the family. The judge, after deliberating for a while, gave his verdict. Mikołaj was acquitted of all charges. Sergei's conduct was investigated internally, and he was suspended from his duties. Justice, though late, had been done. Helena, Ivan, and John left the courthouse with Mikołaj in the middle, holding his mother's hand. The sun, which had been hidden behind the clouds for so long, finally appeared. They knew that the fight was not over. The journey of acceptance was ongoing, and challenges would always be there. But now they had tools, support, and most importantly, they had each other. The pain of the past still existed, but it was softened by the certainty that they had fought for Mikołaj, and in the end, they had won. Their story is not about a complete victory over the world, but about inner victory. The acceptance that life with autism is a different journey, with its own challenges and beauty. They learned that true strength does not lie in violence or the power of a badge, but in resilience, empathy, and unconditional love. They left the courtroom with the certainty that a voice, even when whispered, can echo louder than any shout of arrogance. Not all love speaks, but all true love listens. If this story touched you, like, comment, and subscribe. Someone may need to hear this today.